Patrick Tomaso is back on the show, and what's the best way to describe you, Patrick? I mean, I always think of you as a professional tweeter, which is the strangest career path ever. Like your rise to fame is what nobody else seems to do, of Twitter first and then sort of YouTube second. But like,
Yeah, that is kind of weird. I don't really, I guess I
back.
haven't reflected on, yeah, I appreciate you having me. I haven't really reflected on the Twitter side of things. It's one of those things where like Elijah Wood followed me recently, and that's when things started to like sink in that it was kind of whack. Like it was, yeah,
That's
like,
cool.
and here's the interesting thing. What happens when you start to like get into whatever, it's not even a huge amount of followers, but once you cross that like 10,000, you start to, the worst thing you could possibly do with Twitter is start to second guess your tweets. Cause I think what gets you to that point is just being the most authentically yourself at some point. You know what I mean? So I find that now, and I don't know how you feel about even this with YouTube. Like as I'm about to hit 50K on YouTube, I'm like getting self-conscious about stuff, which I don't usually am that way. But when things become like that gravitas sort of kicks in of the audience, it's hard not to sit back and be like, whoa, okay, there's a lot of people here that are seeing this, and like what is the potential implications of the things that I'm saying? And you know, is everyone taking me seriously? Like, should they be? Am I joking? Am I serious? All that kind of stuff. But yeah, I guess
Is
like
Elijah Wood going to unfollow me?
Totally, yeah, stuff like that, 100%. Where you're like, but for me, like what I just keep telling myself is like, don't think about it, because like the reason you got to these places and these levels is because you just said what you wanted to say, and that's what you believe in, right? So, yeah, professional tweeter, trying my hardest not to be a YouTuber. I mean, mostly like, yeah.
Well, just to what you're saying about the, being more nervous with more success is 100% the case. For me, it's been dependent on the platform. Twitter, I still feel the most comfortable, even though, I've grown, but not, maybe it's because I haven't grown as much. So it still feels like most people following me on Twitter still know me. Like they have a roughly decent idea of who I am. And I kind of feel like, I don't know, I can trust them with my thoughts or something. Like I don't have to worry about them misjudging me. And I know that on YouTube, if I have a video that like pops and the mainstream public sees it, they're going to be the douchebags in the comments. So like, and I don't get that on Twitter.
Totally. And like, that's another thing where like, which is funny is because when I do find myself, I don't know, putting on like YouTube Patrick, which I call it, like, it's like I've become this version of myself for YouTube. And I think to some extent, I think all of us do it, where there's like this, because I've met a lot of, like I've met you, I've met a lot of people outside of YouTube, and we have like a bit of a split personality of like who we are in a video and who we are in real life. There's obviously parts of both sides, but I found when I am as close as I am on Twitter in a YouTube video, I actually find the videos perform better, right? But then I'm fighting myself because I'm like, are people not going to take it seriously, right? Like I did the Apple cloth review, right? And that's the one that ends up on like New York Times and stuff. And I'm like, is that the thing I wanted to get emails from these people being like, I saw you in the New York Times? Like, is this my legacy? Yeah. And, not to get too deep about it, but like, that is something I'm thinking about a lot with YouTube. I'm like, is this really what I want to do? Is this who I want to be known for? Reviewing cameras and laptops? I'm like kind of in that like crisis mode right now, because I think I'm on the eve of 50,000, and that feels like a big number, and it feels like it has some merit. And before, I think I always just sort of treated YouTube as like a joke side hobby thing where I'm just seeing, let's just see what happens. Like no plan, no real strategy. Let's just, whatever I'm interested in at that time. And the strategy isolated video by video. But now I'm like, oh, wow, there's like a thing here. Like there's a lot of people watching this stuff. And like, what are the implications of that for other things that I might want to do in my life and my career? If I want to do more narrative filmmaking and things like that, like there's this legacy of like YouTube tech reviews and stuff. Like, is that me? I don't entirely know. I can't answer it in this conversation, but it's definitely something that's on my mind. And I think it happens to a lot of YouTubers just in the conversations that I've been having with a lot of people, where we start to think about like, I'm also getting older. I look super young, but like I'm 32, coming on 33. So it's like, I'm thinking a lot more of like the long, yeah. But like, I'm not like a young 20-year-old vlogger anymore or anything like that. You know what I mean? So it's like, there's a little bit more of what I'm thinking about, what truly makes me happy creatively. And I'm not entirely sure if YouTube is that, right? So this is turning into therapy for me, right?
I don't think there's any generic advice with this of like, oh, everybody will find that Twitter allows them to be the true version of themselves. Cause I know that's not true. Most people can't figure out what to do with Twitter, which I want to talk about Twitter a little bit as a business after this. So remind me, but most people just like they sign up, they follow a couple people, and they don't know what to do after that. So this is not universal advice at all, even though it seems to work for the two of us.
And it can be discouraging too, right?
Yeah,
Like,
totally.
yeah,
It's just like shouting into the void. But the one that I
totally.
found that I closed down the most on and lost the most confidence is Instagram, which
And
I
yeah,
still post to. Like I probably post, I post more stories than feed photos, but it was very much, there is this feeling of like, I identify as a photographer. Like this is what I've done for work for a long time. And I look at how good so many amateur photographers are on Instagram. I'm like, oh man, this makes it hard to post. Like I just don't know what to put up there anymore. And that's, it's easy to find that mental barrier in any platform. Even if you previously enjoyed it, it can be challenging to keep that sense of creative freedom moving forward. Unfortunately, I think I have a decent balance of it on YouTube. Like I know how I want to approach it, but and I always say on this podcast, I feel like the podcast is where I can also be the most open and the most me, because long form helps for that. The fact that there's no, on YouTube, it's that condensed form factor. Like you need to get your whole point out in 10 minutes and you can't forget anything. So you need to be more organized and more controlled. So I feel like it's harder to really be as sort of openly you, and people don't get to know you as much as more free flowing formats.
yeah. Just before I talk more about Instagram and Facebook stuff, I feel like I have to do the Dieter Bond from Verge disclosure thing. My partner, so my girlfriend actually does work at Meta. So for whatever that means, I don't know any inside secrets or like that, but it's one of those things now, like as
Oh,
our
cool.
relationship.
Vergecast reference. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. She does work at Facebook at Meta. So no biases. I don't use Facebook. I'm very rarely on Instagram too, for a lot of the same reasons that I think like, yeah, like you mentioned, like for me, Instagram just turned into this, like, I don't know. It lost its coolness for me. You know what I mean? Like I just don't feel like it's a cool place to be. And it could be because we're getting older and we were with it when it first came out. And so when you age up with something like that, it's easy just to get bored with it. Like I get bored with iPhones. It's like not that I need the new one every year, but I get bored with the tool, right? Like I sometimes I just need something new to be creatively inspired. And currently Instagram just doesn't creatively inspire me. And I also find that from a photography standpoint, I've found way more success in people finding my work and my talent through Twitter. Like I kind of built Twitter on conversation and jokes and stuff like that in my personality, but I've found an audience there too with like my art and my creativity, which I think is interesting that I don't think I ever really found on Instagram, right? And even though I have more followers on Instagram, like I find way more engagement and community in the photography space within Twitter. And I've had like actual conversations with engineers and stuff at Twitter about the back end and like quality and all that kind of stuff. I've been in like think groups and stuff like that to make it look nicer, make it look better. And I do think they've really listened to us a lot. And like from a quality standpoint, just in terms of like what you can post there and how good things look, still a lot of work to be done on the video side. But for me, it just feels like a community and a platform that fosters us a little bit better than Instagram, which I think Instagram is going way too far into e-com and trying to be a TikTok competitor, which is a whole other conversation. But if we're just talking like I'm a photographer, personally speaking, like I do a lot of social content for clients, and of course, Instagram is a big part of that content that we create. Personally, for me though, like it hasn't really impacted my business. The more I post, or the less I post, right? So I would actually, like, as an advice thing, I would say like if you're doing Instagram, like just start trying to get into the Twitter side of photography too, because that community will build you up a lot faster, in my opinion, than the
Yeah.
capacity of Instagram at this point, right?
I think if anybody's afraid of getting started with Twitter, you could just start off by just treat it like Instagram, or
Totally.
what Instagram used to be, because it's becoming
Yeah,
less and
what it
less of
used to
that
be.
now. It really
Yeah,
is.
totally.
Yeah, now it's TikTok. But if you just post your photos there, just post high resolution, because they're going to look way better than they do on Instagram.
Yeah.
Like Twitter's also, it's sort of filling the gap of what like Flickr used to be, of like you can see the real quality, you can really zoom in all the way, and we just haven't had anything that's doing that since Instagram really took over. But so in a slightly more news side of things, Jack Dorsey stepped down.
Yep.
Who knows how voluntary it really was, but I'm a little nervous, and then I'd love to hear what you think about it, because you
Yeah.
spend more time on there than I do. The reason makes sense from Twitter shareholders. I totally get why there would be a desire to finally make some money, because for all of the cultural
Totally.
impact that Twitter has, which is enormous, like that's where the headlines are coming from. As much as regular people may feel like they don't use Twitter personally, they are reading the results of tweets every single day in whatever journalism path they get their news in, because the journalists are all on Twitter. So it's, it's where everything is happening. And same with YouTubers. I mean, it's like the chat room of YouTubers, I feel like. So there's always so much happening there. And I am definitely worried that if the goal is to now make Twitter more profitable, which it's always struggled to be, and I kind of understand why, I'm not totally sure that's going to be great for the users. I don't know.
Yeah, I
Are
think
you nervous about it, or you feel fine? Like, what are you thinking?
I feel okay about it now, but I think we're already starting to see a lot of the implications of it even before Jack stepped down. I think Twitter Blue was an interesting concept. I also think that ads have really kicked in a lot more in feed. If you haven't noticed, like in replies specifically, in the threaded replies, I've actually like tweeted about how bad it's gotten. And so, look, I'm all for the service being free, and just like any other thing, if they got to pay for it with ads, that's fine. But at least give me the option to opt out of those ads. Like I've been a YouTube Premium, subscriber for years now. Like I don't think I could ever really go back. And I feel like Twitter Blue is an odd answer because it doesn't remove the ads, right? So it adds all these kind of whatever features and stuff like that I'm sure a lot of people get used to. I actually do like the undo button and stuff like that, but for me, it's like if I'm gonna pay the $3 a month, I'll pay $5 a month if I want, just to not see those ads. Because there was for a long time, like it wasn't that bad. Like you would go on Twitter, and yeah, every once in a while you would see an ad here and there, but it was never as obtrusive as Instagram or YouTube, right? It was very passive, and that's probably why they were so successful. But it's probably why they were never making money either, right? So I think frequency is a concern, right?
They do a bad job of pre-roll as well, for their video ads, because they try to do it the same way that YouTube does. And there's only a few people I follow that seem to have monetization enabled. It's very rare, even out of like big creators. I can only think of like 2 or 3 that have ads in their videos. But I never end up seeing their videos, because like the way I interact with Twitter is I'm scrolling through and I see something start to play. I pause for a moment to decide if I'm going to watch it, and I realize it's an ad. I maybe I watch for another 1 second. I'm like, am I going to wait through this? And I'm like, you know what? No, I'm not. I have no idea what this content is. I haven't. You don't have the chance to decide if you want to watch the content or not, and you're already spending just as long watching an ad. So I just keep scrolling. And I think it's more effective on Instagram, where the ads are just in between, right? Like, so if the ad is engaging enough, you might just watch it as content, but it's not preventing you from seeing real content. And actually, I mean,
disclaimer,
I still don't have ads on Instagram, so I don't actually know what that experience is like. But
also because we're in Canada, like our monetization is usually pretty behind on a lot of stuff too. Like TikTok's still rough for us and whatnot. I don't think this whole CEO thing, like I don't think it can actually fundamentally change the value of Twitter's core, but it does have the potential to ruin the experience. But from what I understand, the gentleman that's taking over, like he's been with Twitter for a long time and started as like an engineer, right?
CTO just before this.
CTO before that, and then an engineer like that. Apparently was like, I was listening to a thing on the Washington Post podcast where he was like a big, part of like making sure the site didn't. If you don't remember, like the Twitter blue whale was a big thing where it would never forget. It would crash a lot. Yeah, apparently he was like monumental in like that never happening again, right? So I think he understands experience being important, and I obviously can't speak from that because I don't know too much about all of it, but I'm optimistic that it would be. You'd have to really want to ruin Twitter to make it bad, because Twitter is always at the mercy of the users to an extent. Like we really decide how that platform sort of goes forward. Whereas something like Facebook, I feel like they're like way more cool with like, we're just going to redesign the whole thing, and whatever if you don't care, too bad, right? Whereas Twitter's been very gradually adding little flavor spice here and there with new things, but the core of it is as simple as it's been since it really first came out. Like, yeah, they'll add a little bit more characters to your tweet, but the level playing field of, we all have the same sort of compose button, I think is really interesting about Twitter. And as long as they don't really mess with that too much, it's fine. Add spaces, add some audio components here and there, but the core I don't think the core is really changing much at this point, right?
Yeah. At this point, I just hope it stays that way.
Yeah.
I have a not that interesting anecdote about speaking of the fail whale and also the formation of Twitter. So I was at iStock Photo when that started, and I was good friends with the guy that is the designer of the initial Twitter bird, because the funny thing about both that bird and the fail whale is they were stock illustrations from iStock. So they had just licensed them, and it became iconic, right? It became their design, and especially the bird, they afterwards just re-illustrated into their own logo, but it was just a stock bird illustration at first. And anyway, yeah, so Simon Oxley's the creator and does not get the credit for it because it's sort of stock, and then they just took it from there. But yeah, no, I mean, it's both weird how far we've come and how not far we've come, because it's
Yeah, the other thing is like
product.
the thing that, like, for context, that I usually tell a lot of people too, that think, when people think like Twitter's the end all be all, but you gotta, like, in terms of users, like, Twitter's a small country on a globe, right? It's like we're very, like, Twitter's a small monthly user base compared to Facebook or even YouTube and stuff like that, right? So that's, I'm sure growth is going to be a huge thing for them, especially if they're answering to shareholders and all that kind of stuff. So that will be interesting. I don't think advertising's necessarily always the answer. If you look at, like, take a page out of Netflix or something like that, like, subscriber growth is always the goal, right? They're investing millions and billions into content, and, like, they'll take losses for years. Like, if I'm not mistaken, they take losses most of the time, right? But they're building audience, they're building audience, and it just doesn't feel like Twitter's really had that investment growth period yet. I mean, maybe that's what's coming. What that looks like, I have absolutely no idea. But I think things like making the platform better for people to create on is something that will bring more of us there. And if we are creating more there, it'll bring more of an audience there. So if they go at it from not necessarily, like, solving the advertising problem first, but solving the consumption problem first, of, like, getting more eyeballs on stuff that we're making there. And it's not just all of us, or like you said, how Twitter's like a Discord chat for creators and stuff. I think it is that for almost every niche. If you're into cars, I'm sure car Twitter is this sort of, like, just, solo kind of group chat for those people. But, like, how do you bring it beyond that, outside of just politics, right?
Yeah, no, the thing that their biggest problem is, which I know the investors don't, they think, that it's like ads first is where they need to first fix where your income is coming from. But the real bigger problem is, like, normal people just don't understand. I mean, it's what I was saying earlier. Like, my personal friends in real life, almost none of them are on Twitter. And if they are, it's very casually. It's not, they don't really participate. They just occasionally look at it, but almost zero normal people I know are. But I do want to say that anybody that is a creator or aspiring creator, or just, like, wants to be part of broader online communities, like, I know some people that, like, take a while to sign up because they don't get it. Just dive in. It is so worth just being present there. And it's how I've made all the connections that I have to other creators. And the difference between being in Twitter and not being in Twitter is, like, just being left out. Like, you don't know what you're missing if you're not hanging out there, but by being there, you have so much more understanding of what's going on in whatever your niche happens to be, especially in terms of, like, photography and video production, stuff like that. So yeah, strongly endorse.
It's the networking conference for all of us every day, right? It's like the conversations that you can have with, and that's the thing, that level playing field is so interesting to me, where it's like, you could talk to your favorite celebrity, or you can talk to, you can find whoever, you could talk to another YouTuber. Like, there's no like scale in terms of who's going to answer you, who's going to have a conversation with you. And it's hard to replicate that anywhere else. And that is the meal ticket, in my opinion, with Twitter, is that the level playing field. I just love that we all have that same compose button, where as YouTube, it's like, what camera do you have? What lighting setup? What is your script? There's, like, so many variables to that for someone to try and be daunted and, like, with barriers, right? Whereas with someone with Twitter, if you're watching, it's just like, start tweeting. You have a joke, start with a joke. You have cool photos, post those. And if you're at it enough, you will find that audience, engage with other people, communicate with them, all that kind of stuff, jump on trends, all that kind of stuff. It just seems like it's a slow growth. I will say it takes a long time to grow an account there, but I do think the payoff is immense for being there.
This episode is brought to you by privacy.com. We've all had those moments where we suddenly feel a little vulnerable with how much of our data is just floating around on the internet. I remember when my iPhone was stolen, I was suddenly very sensitive to it, and I wanted to make sure everything was secure. Privacy is a tool that makes it easy to manage your financial life online while keeping your most important information secure. By getting virtual numbers, Privacy masks your bank information so you never have to worry about giving it out to people you don't know online. A great example is every time you sign up for any service, you are kind of trusting that they will never get hacked. And even if they're a really reputable business, there's no guarantee. These things do happen, and then all of a sudden, whatever you've put into their system might be available in other systems. So if you use privacy, then you're taking back control of your payments. So you can decide who can charge your card, how much and how often, and you can close cards at any time. Plus, you can make sure that you never accidentally billed twice or upgraded to another service without your consent. And privacy is also partnered with the good folks at 1Password, so you can create, use, and save privacy cards directly within your 1Password dashboard. All the virtual cards that you create in 1Password will have the same security benefits as your other privacy cards. And you can set spend limits, create single use or merchant locked cards whenever you want. So head to privacy.com/Stallman and sign up for a new account. New customers will automatically get $5 to spend on your first purchase. So go to privacy.com/Stallman and sign up now. Thanks again to Privacy for supporting the show. Well, yeah. So another interesting thing about new CEO coming in too, from what I've heard, is he's also a big part of the initiative that they've been working on for a while of bringing in a Web3 concept to Twitter. I don't think it's like primarily like a crypto play with them, but they kind of want to become the infrastructure for Twitter-like features across the rest of the web, which is interestingly ambitious. I'll be very surprised if it happens, because it's we've never seen Twitter try to do anything ambitious like that. Everything they attempt is very like it's siloed, right? It's like there's spaces over here, and if you want to interact with them, you can totally ignore them, and we're probably going to shut them down after some period of time. And then Periscope, like it's all very broken out. So the idea that they're just going to become some kind of open API for the rest of the internet to host this kind of conversation, I'll be surprised if it worked out. But it also offers a segue into something else I want to talk to you about, which is just generally half my Twitter feed lately is either people pumping Web3 or memes making fun of it, or both within the same tweet. And I don't know, the last episode, I finally talked about cryptocurrencies and blockchain a little bit in general, but I feel like there is still so much momentum behind larger concepts of Web3, tons of energy behind NFTs, especially in photography communities that I follow. Like more and more people I know personally are getting involved in it, and some of them finding great success. Noah Kalina, who's been on this show, just looking at what he has on Foundation. So he had a great series for sale the other day, but he put together, his series is the photo every day that he's been doing for over 20 years now. And he did a collage of the first 20 years of every single photo that was on it, and sold that for however many Ethereum adds up to $50,000. And then I saw that it's relisted now for $500,000. So, it's just this interesting, and the interesting thing about NFTs is you'd get a kickback if that resale happens. He doesn't just
you're like constantly payment. It's like residuals.
So we basically get another 50 or whatever. So that's just like very specific examples. I don't want to go too far down any one rabbit hole, because what it can be is so many things. I just have regular people asking me every day if they should if they're missing out by not being part of Web3, or if they should be worried about the Metaverse taking over. And I don't know, where are you at with it?
I mean, the NFT space, I've kind of consciously stayed out of that conversation, at least in Twitter and stuff like that. I've had a lot of like good offline conversations with people about it, but like there's two sides of it. One side of it is I haven't really found much interest in the types of art that have been sort of being sold for like astronomical amounts of money. And it's not to say that there's anything wrong with them. Art is completely subjective. So I understand why stuff is selling, but it's not really a space that I operated in, the type of creativity they want to do. And then the other side of it is that I've always had an ethos of, here's my stuff, it's for you to use, and it's mostly free if I've put it on these channels. And it seems to like counter that sort of like moral compass that I have. Like I was a huge fan of Unsplash, and I've like had great success in their top 50 contributions, top 100 downloads of all time on that site. And like, because I use it so much, you know what I mean? It's like I use those sites to build, keynote decks and, shot lists and stuff for clients and website templates, all that kind of stuff. And I love the idea of the web being an open and free space. Whereas I think like NFTs going backwards in time a little bit to like Creative Commons type stuff and copyright and all that. And it just feels, I'm hesitant towards it. I understand the value of a new way for us to sell art. That is really interesting to me, but I don't like the implications of everybody saying everything should have some sort of Ethereum value attached to it. The crappiest thing of all time to the greatest thing of all time. That seems not the web that I really want to be a part of. So I've had a hard time, and I've struggled to sort of find my access point. the other side of me is the internet troll, where I'm like, fuck yeah, let's do this. Why not? Like I'm a huge fan of shit posts and memes and stuff like that. So it's like, why not, do a pepperoni pizza series or something? You know what I mean? Where it's like, why not get into it if this just seems to be a thing that people are spending money on as its own art project? Of like, if people are going to buy whatever they want to buy, why not get into that? And then my moral compass kicks in again. It's like, because no, I like this free internet. I like the fact that if you want my photos, go for it. Make it your wallpaper, download it, right click, save, go for it. It's all fine. Sure. When I do client work, those clients are paying me. They're licensing that stuff to do that. I'm not out here trying to sell art, so I can't really relate to it in that extent either, right? So I could see if I was someone who was trying to sell art and that being a new avenue for me, and if I found an audience, 100% go for it. Make your money. That's what you're here for. Personally speaking, though, I've just had an access point issue of getting into the whole NFT thing of it. And then, like, not to dunk on that community at all, but I have found a bit of it like hard to access and how they communicate and like the sort of like barriers to entry within it, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like,
I think it's okay. I think it's okay to dunk on them a little bit.
Okay, yeah,
they're very vocal,
gatekeeper and vocal. It's just like, there seems to be like steps and rules to how you do a launch and stuff that you have to sort of like follow. That's like an unwritten thing too. So you got to get into this whole thing. You got to say the whole GM good morning every day. And I'm just like, is this me? Do I want to like taint my presence within the internet just to get into this, to maybe make a quick buck out of it? Like that doesn't seem right. So to go at it, you got to be like, sorry, go ahead.
The GM thing, it feels super culty to me. Like
it does. Yeah. It feels
I mean,
weird.
I don't want to like over dramatize it, but it's like, there's just so much of it. It's not occasional. It's not just a running joke. Maybe it's a running joke. Like, I don't know, but it's like every day from so many people. And not being in it, it's this feeling of like, is this just like this, sort of secret handshake to like, if you don't do the handshake, you're not in the club.
Stonecutter really society thing. Like, it's like, like that part of it is just definitely not my vibe or what I stand for. So that is obviously another barrier of entry for me. But like, the other thing is like, someone like Beepu, who was like the highest selling NFT of all time. I really enjoyed his art previous to the whole NFT craze. So like that one like actually made a lot of sense to me, because it was like, it kind of fit what he did, making digital art. And it was like his own art project in a sense. The fact that it sold for so much is like very Banksy to me. Like it's its own statement in itself, that the fact that the piece sold for so much, right? And his pieces continue to sell for so much. So that made sense to me. But then my worry is a lot of people just sort of jumped in on it, like the .com craze or something, where it's like, or even Shopify. It's like, we all got to start a t-shirt store now. We all got to do this. We all got to drop ship, right? And I feel like that's sort of what's happening with NFTs. Like we all got to get in on it, because this will crash and bubble at some point, and you'll all sit back and be like, I can't believe we missed it. But I'm also like, I don't know if I'd be worried if I missed it. Like I might be okay if I sit this one out. You know what I mean?
There'll be another thing. Yeah.
There'll be another thing. And
I think I come to a similar conclusion to you, but through a different path. Because what you're saying about, that you like to be able to give as much as you can away for free, and then you have your paying clients. Yeah. I like everyone to get paid for as much as they possibly can. Like if it's work, totally. I love getting paid. I like to see other people get paid, especially when it comes to creative stuff. And so like, it is exciting for me when I see photographers be able to like come out with a good paycheck. I was talking about Noah before. Yeah. He's always been one of my like all-time favorite photographers. I've been following him since I was a teenager, and he's influenced my work a lot. So I love seeing him find success and other people like that. So I like there being a new market for creative work that can make incredible money. And I'm not totally sure that it's going to be sustainable long-term. I kind of have a feeling that this will come in and go. And there probably will be something a bit more sustainable that'll shake out of it in the future. But a lot of that suspicion comes from the fact that there was the framework for this already, and it was just legal. It was like, you could always buy the rights to any image. And it was not that hard to. Like, this was totally available. If you emailed your favorite photographer and you're like, I want to give you $50,000 to own all the rights to this one image, they'd all say yes, because like they would love the money, and like nobody else, So having it be on the blockchain, I don't feel like is really actually changing the how society functions in terms of exchanging art in a lot of ways. It just kind of made everybody aware that, you could own the original rights to it. So yeah, I love people making money. I'm glad there's a new way towards it. But what I'm not into is that I don't participate in it at this moment because I don't see the underlying value to the final product being purchased, and that in the
Yeah.
same way that I was just talking about. So
Yeah.
we've always licensed our photography through Stock. Stocksy is still the agency that has our work for sale, and we still make a paycheck from it every month. And that's all. I've always had a side income of some amount of stock licensing coming through, and it's very similar to what an NFT is like. I'm selling a license to the image. People could right click it and download it, but instead they get a larger resolution version of the file, but more importantly, they get a license allowing them to use it, right? So an NFT is kind of the same thing. You could already download the image, but now you have a blockchain license saying that you have permission to do whatever you want with it, because now you own it. Or not. You may not actually own the license. That's optional. Anyway, the payment part is great, but I just like, I don't think that the person spending all that money is really getting that much benefit most of the time by owning a JPEG.
Yeah, there's like, that's the thing. It's like, look, I'm a big fan of like physical media too. Like I collect CDs, I collect cassette tapes, VHS and stuff. And like there's the collector in me can understand the psychological value of feeling like you own something. So there's something into that I think is kind of fueling a lot of this too, where it's like it's for you yourself. Like we could all look at pictures of Pokemon cards, but there's totally something different when someone actually has that Charizard. Clearly, when you see like YouTube blowing up with like, $1 million Pokemon cards, stuff like that, we can all look at those as photos on the internet and be like, okay, that's it, that's cool. But there's something about having like the actual thing. I don't know if I can relate that psychologically to something digital because I grew up in a right-click save as kind of world, and that's just who I am. So I don't get the same emotional value of owning something on the internet. I don't even like having an iTunes version of a movie that I like. I need the actual copy, right? And like I've been monitoring sort of like the sales of physical media over the last few years too. Like cassettes are up like 120% year over year from last. Like sure, it's not the volume of what people are streaming, like not even close. But the fact that there's like a world where people actually do value owning things is very interesting to me. So I just don't see that same value feeling with an NFT for myself, but I could see how people could feel that way. Like they'll start collecting things. I could see Gen Z getting into it as like, oh, this is things that I own and there's actual monetary value to this stuff. And there's other people that also see this as a collection that they really like and enjoy. And we're all spending money on it. And that's the value we've perceived and we've put on it ourselves, right? Because at the end of the day, like art is the value we put on it, right? We could say, sorry, go ahead.
I was trying to make the Web3 pitch to my wife the other day, just trying to explain it. And I don't pitch it very well because I don't think there's a lot to it yet. But I couldn't even describe the future optimistic version. Like the most exciting I could make it sound is I'm like, okay, you know how in Fortnite people spend a lot of money on different costumes and dances? Yeah. I would never ever do that. And I think it's crazy to do that. But yeah, apparently lots of people do it. Well, now if you do that, and if all the other developers sign on, which I'm very skeptical that they ever would, then you could transport those dances and costumes to other games. And that's the future of the web economy. And I'm just like, that doesn't sound interesting. Like that doesn't, that already exists. You can already do that if you don't need crypto for these companies to decide to support interoperable costumes and dances and whatever. And that's the best pitch I've heard so far. Then there's other things for like, music DAOs, I guess. I don't really actually know the suggestion of how it would work that communities could come together to, basically buy music in a way that the musician's able to get more money. But I've heard this proposed, but that could happen right now on Shopify or GoFundMe or, like this, there's nothing being enabled by the new technology. So
yeah, it feels like a rebranding of a lot of things too. Yeah. Like, and I also wonder like, okay, let's hypothetically say Apple comes out with their AR glasses next year, right? Hypothetically, best case scenario, they come out with some sort of, there's the rumors that it's like some $3,000 niche unit for developers and stuff like that. Sure, whatever. Has to start small and then they'll scale, right? Where does Apple look at that and go, we want people to buy digital clothes in this or whatever, these art in their house and stuff? And like, I can't imagine the way Apple works and the way they have these, like, to be honest, like closed down ecosystems, like we just saw with the whole Epic Games thing with the App Store. What does that look like from an open Web3 blockchain NFT type space? Like I personally, not even just to be an Apple fanboy or sheep, I'm kind of like cautiously optimistic to see what company's going to step in for me to start taking it seriously. You know what I mean? Like, and maybe that's the wrong, maybe I'll eat my words one day on that, but it's like, I'm more curious to see when a company like Apple or Google, like these guys that are really controlling the internet at this point, to be honest, what are they going to do in that space? Do they think it's something that's down the road? I know they care about crypto. We've heard Tim Cook say he owns crypto and stuff like that. That's fine. But crypto is very different than the NFT stuff where you're buying digital goods, right? And that's where I'm kind of just like, where's that going to go? Like, look, I like the Oculus Quest 2. I like wearing VR and I like playing in those spaces and stuff like that, but I don't care about what I own in those spaces, right? It's like that stuff doesn't have any sort of meaning or value to me. And I don't imagine a future where that will happen. I don't even imagine a future of Apple convincing me I'm going to own some digital version of something. Like, what is that? What I can't, like you said, I can't imagine the future where it's exciting. So it has to be told. It has to be told to me at some point, right? Yeah.
So all this said, do you have any money in crypto, like as a speculative financial thing? You do?
I do, yeah.
Because I do too. Because if we're gonna crap on it a lot, I also want to say the reasons I'm not 100% against it. So
totally same. And it's like, I see the crypto benefit of like, decentralized, get away from banks and all that stuff. That's your money, you own it within that. It's all, the way the whole, and the funny thing is like, I got into it without even like doing a whole lot of research about it. Like, I don't know the ins and outs of how it all works and the minting and how to like, all that is beyond me. But I know enough of it from like a speculative market sense that I treat it more like I would treat stocks. So it's just another way to invest right now. And so I keep up on it in that sense. And like, as companies are saying they're going to start like enabling payments through crypto, like that to me is like when Tesla was saying like they were going to do crypto and then they got rid of it and all that, whatever. But like moments like those are where I'm like, okay, yeah, look, when a big company takes a giant leap like this is how the rest of the world gets like the door open for them, right? I just don't think we've had that yet with NFT space. We haven't had a big company to say like, oh, okay, yeah, it's okay, everybody, this is fine. The water, jump on in, the water's fine kind of feel. It's just really a lot of trepidation across the map. And that concerns me of like, I don't want to get into it and then get burned, or it's not the experience that I thought it was going to be, right?
Well, or in the most popular conversations about this, like if you just look at YouTube videos explaining it, or if you listen to the biggest podcasts about crypto, you're going to also start getting a feeling pretty quickly that you need a lot of money to actually be involved with any of this. Like if you are not wealthy, like, you have money to literally light on fire, taking a huge risk on something that doesn't exist at all. Like this is for people that have play money. If it matters to you that your next paycheck goes to, keeping your apartment or, getting shoes that aren't so worn out, like you don't have to be, you have to just have quite a bit of extra money to be able to be playing around with crypto. Like it is so not a true mainstream concept. So, and I don't feel like that gets acknowledged enough in these popular conversations, that it's like, this is such a privileged thing to be messing around with at this point, and pretending that like it's on the cusp of revolutionizing everybody's life. It's like, we're just not close. That's not happening anytime soon.
And the ship sort of sailed too on the NFT side of things, of like even getting stuff posted. Like there's, first off, like getting on the sites is its own concern and issue. But then there's like these things called gas fees where you got to pay to you got to invest to get your pieces out to people. And so you're putting money up front. It's kind of like renting space at a gallery essentially, right? Where I got to pay to put this work even out there. And I don't know if anybody's going to really buy it. And like those fees apparently keep going up and up and up. And like that early kind of boom where everybody just said, let's play around, let's have some fun with it. Like there was that story of that like 14-year-old kid that made like 40 grand or something like that, making little avatars or something, right? Like that ship has kind of sailed a little bit at this point, where like if you really want to get in it now, you got to be really stand by the work that you did, but also have that upfront capital to get the pieces out there. And then that whole thing again, like you got to get into that community. And like this is total speculation, but there seems to be a bit of a like NFT laundering scheme a little bit, where it's like a lot of people are buying pieces, trading, moving, and it's like it's showing volume and it's showing that people are buying things, but it seems like a lot of buying within the community itself. And that is also a bit concerning to me. Like when it becomes a little bit more public and it's like, random people start buying it. Like, look, we just talked about like people aren't even wanting to use Twitter. It seems like it's hard for me to convince my friends to be like, you should buy this like little clip art. Well, for, especially when $4,000, right?
Yeah, all the prices that we're hearing about are thousands. I mean, like
thousands. Yeah.
When I look at the artists that I like, I'm like, wow, this isn't this isn't a story of spending hundreds on a special edition like box material that you might from a musician, like you'd get with when I love a musician. Yeah, I can imagine spending a few $100 on merch or
Buy the
box sets,
vinyl,
whatever.
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, but like it is just a whole other realm of like what you need to invest to support artists that you like. And I think I'd be less suspicious of it all if those average prices were like there's more people finding success when they're selling everything for $100 a piece, or finding a way to make $30 casual photos turn into a business, or but the idea that no, you're not going to participate in this unless each piece that you make is worth at least $5,000. Super weird to me. I don't know.
It's funny you say that, because like the low price, high volume is interesting, because like I'm more interested in like what Canupsi's doing with wallpapers. The fact that people are paying $5-10 for a wallpaper. I think years ago, even if someone told you that on paper, they'd laugh at you. Like who's going to pay $10 for a wallpaper? But his volume is crazy, right? It's awesome.
I bought some. Or
exactly.
Also, I mean, looking back at my last year as well, it's been almost exactly a year since I put together my first pack of my LUT pack and Lightroom presets, which I did a pretty minimal amount of effort into it. I was basically like, look, I have a set of presets that I already use myself, that I've tweaked and developed over time and turned into exactly the way that I like them. So hey, like, instead of just making them free, how about I charge a few bucks for them, and they can kind of be a way to support the things that I do. And they've just sort of like gradually sold throughout the year, and they're not very expensive, but like I've gotten an extra little paycheck every month. Like it definitely has counted for something, and it is a way to support a mid-level creator. And it's like, but the thing is, it doesn't rely on any external technology. Like this is just processing a credit card, and you get the thing, and then it's over.
Totally.
So,
and what's interesting about that too is like psychologically, it's like, I the reason I use Isaac's option thing too is like, a lot of people could just right click and save those images, but they're buying it, right? They're physically saying, I want it. Yeah, totally.
It was in my
and like that
video,
to me is like a really good litmus test for like, you can't be afraid to charge money for things. There are things where you can say like, look, I think this has value, and I've told you this is what I think the value is. If you don't agree with it, there will be piracy. There will be people that take it off, but the vast majority of people now are not pirating things anymore. Like we thought that would happen, if you want to call it in like Web 2, you know what I mean? Like we had that whole Napster nonsense. We had all that. And the internet figured it out. We stream, we do these things, we buy movies, we watch them on HBO Max, we do all that. The vast majority of people are still paying for content and creativity. It's a very, very small number in terms of the people that are abusing the system as it stands right now. So I'm also not entirely sure what NFTs and blockchain solve on that front either. The whole like, well, I know that I own this thing now. Well, a lot of people were buying stuff already. So what is it that you're really trying to solve? There was one sort of interesting thing that I heard Jon Favreau talk about in a behind the scenes for Mandalorian. As we get into deep fakes, what he said is like, blockchains might be the only way for us to verify a person on a screen, which I thought was like terrifying on one side. But then I saw utility. That was the first time I saw utility for blockchain from a creativity sense. Because when they did Mark Hamill and they made him the young, sorry for Mandalorian spoilers, but it's way beyond that point now. But when Luke shows up at the end, when Luke shows up at the end, like he's talked about, like, look, the technology is basically there now where you can make a photorealistic human being say and do whatever the hell you want. So blockchain might be one of the only ways to actually verify the video that you watched of that human being was actually that human being. So that's a little food for thought. The Matrix,
and conversations like that are absolutely why I'm not skeptical about there being some applications that end up making sense. And that killer app could always show up any day now. And by owning, and to wrap this up kind of soon, because I can't talk about Web3 all day, which is like,
yeah, it's all good.
Also the most hilarious rebrand. It's like Web 2.0 already existed, and we were calling websites that existed Web 2.0. It was a name for a thing that existed. And Web 3 is like, no, we're just going to rebrand crypto and the metaverse and all these things. We're just going to start calling them that, even though none of them have any applications yet. Anyway, they will. I do think there will be some kind of application that'll become useful in the future. And by investing in various coins, it's not the same for all of the tokens. So like Bitcoin is basically purely speculative. I've heard it described as like the gold of crypto, and so it's just this feeling of like it's going to probably keep going up in the long term. So, but I have very little of Bitcoin, like barely any. Most of what we have invested was into Ethereum, and in a few in alternate altcoins. And the goal with that, or the way of thinking about it that I justify it by, is that like it's the same as betting on tech companies in the 90s. Like these are going to be the technologies that end up solving these problems. Ethereum obviously is leading the way in terms of them, but they have some fundamental problems. So there's room for others to come up. But so it's the same as like buying stock in Oracle in 1997 or something, or I don't know the real equivalent. Blake, you're like this will be part of the future infrastructure, and I'm placing bets on who's going to position themselves as a key tool in that killer app when it eventually arrives, and it hasn't yet. So I'd also like to talk about video workflow a little bit, because I always find it interesting the way that you do things, which is, I'd say, like relatively not non-conventional in your approach to videos and stuff. Like you have a unique look, and I really love it. And what I guess just like, what are some of the tools that you've really found useful over the past year that have helped you create? And I guess not just video as well, like, photography tools, video tools. Like, what are the things that have really sort of shaped your creative process lately?
Yeah. So for me, like everything is about the least barriers possible. And it's not that I'm lazy. It's just that my brain moves at 1,000 miles per minute. And as soon as something impedes,
you make a lot of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, as soon as something impedes on that process, I tend to jump off it and go somewhere else. And so if I'm going to be doing YouTube stuff, for example, I want everything that I do with YouTube to be like a well-oiled machine as best as it possibly can. Because it's like, I find that as soon as something, especially because it's like not my main job, like for those that don't know, like YouTube is a side hustle for me. Like I do client commercial photography and videography stuff. So I want YouTube to feel fun. I want YouTube to be this place where I can be myself and have some fun with it and do cool things that I probably necessarily wouldn't have the option to do with clients. And it's also a testing ground for me for ideas and concepts and learning things. And so when it comes to that, like I remember when the M1 first came out, there was a lot of hesitation in conversations of like, I got to wait for the Pro version. I need to get the Pro version. I just spent $4,000 on a 16-inch MacBook Pro. That kept kind of going out there, but I took a gamble, I guess, on that M1 Mac Mini, because I was like, look, I'm running a 15-inch, Intel MacBook Pro that cost $3,000, $3,500 when it came out, and it was chugging. It was, the fans were going blasting. I'm like, I'm so sick of this computer. Let me take this, gamble on the machine, see what happens. And I can actually like if I look at my analytics, I can actually see the upload quantity go up and the value of the views go up when I got that machine, because it was like, I can shoot and edit and get videos up in half a day now, a couple hours here and there. And I never felt any sort of slowdown in that process with that M1 Mac Mini. And so then when the iMac came out, which I'm using for this right now, it's like, when that came out, I was like, that's just one more machine there that I can be inspired by and have fun with. It's all in one. It's cool. I had thought about it, and I was thinking about you with this machine when I got it too. It was like, it seemed like a really cool on-set photo, like Lightroom Capture One type computer too, to have on set with me for tethering and stuff like that. Obviously, with the pandemic, I haven't had many opportunities to use it that way. It is in the pipeline for that. I would love to use it that way. But for me, like the M1 and the MacBooks and even the iPhone, like when I did my 13 Pro review, it's like, I've been happy with phones for the last like 4 or 5 years. Like, to be completely honest with you, like the way that I shoot and the way that I edit, like I don't need the best of the best, but like I just like the new thing because it inspires me. And when it came to that 13 Pro, even when that came out, it's just like, it just gets the shot faster and easier, and it looks better out of the gate, just marginally enough to keep me excited to keep making things with it. And that's sort of how I feel with all cameras. Like right now I've been using an old X100T, which is like, I don't know, we're two or three versions behind the latest version of that camera. And I'm not using it because it looks the best. I'm using it because it inspires me the most to use it. And I've been posting photos of it for the last like month or so, and everyone's been loving them. And it's like, everyone's like, what camera? And I don't even really like to answer that question usually, because for me, it puts out this world of like, it's the camera that made these videos and this photo so great. And I'm at this crossroads right now with a lot of that within YouTube. In my last camera review, I haven't talked about how it might be one of my last camera reviews, because I'm hitting this point now where I'm like, I'm lacking the excitement to be like, oh wow, it's got 10-bit now, and oh, it shoots RAW over HDMI. I'm like, yeah, we've been doing that for years now. Like, I don't really think it's going to make you a better filmmaker or a better YouTuber. I'm much more into the tools that are inspiring you and are easy to use, rather than what's the best of the best that's out. Now, the tech side of me and just the fanboy of technology progressing forward, of course, loves that stuff. I think the Ronin 40 is like a huge leap forward for the industry. But I'm more interested in buying that camera 5 years from now when I can pick it up used. Like I don't see it adding monumental value to what I do in this current moment. But when it's cheaper and more affordable and I can have some new tool to play with, that's exciting to me. So in an overall way, I'm always just looking for the least barriers possible to get whatever is up here onto a screen, and making it fun throughout that entire process too. I've had a jokey thing where sorry, go ahead.
It's part of the reason I'd really shifted towards only reviewing video cameras. Like I haven't done really any photo cameras for a while, because that had stabilized so much earlier. They already got good enough, really around like the 5D Mark IV.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Since then, it's like there are things to talk about, and I keep talking about them, but it's not as crazy as what has been happening on the video side. But like you say, we're starting to get to that level point where every price point has some camera that is good enough for the final output won't be sacrificed based on which camera you choose. Like it will be good enough whether you use camera A, B, or C. It was like that for a long time with photography, but it's just getting there now with video. So
yeah. And like, that's the thing. It's like, I'll tell, cause I mean, you get these questions all the time too, but like everyone always asks me, what camera should I buy? What camera should I buy? Like first thing I start with is obviously price point, but then also like, what are you making? Like what's exciting to you? What's interesting to you? And then if I start to realize like, I just want to run around and I want to shoot B-roll and I want to do some mini docs and stuff like that, I'm like, autofocus is going to be important for you. So let's start looking at these brands, right? Like for me, it's like niche features that certain cameras are better at, which is totally a real thing. And it'll make your job easier. Like there's a reason Sony has taken off so well with that autofocus and just the cameras themselves. They tend to do everything the best and the most well-rounded in terms of that. I personally think they're still a little bit overpriced, but I think as all these other cameras catch up with autofocus, even Canon's doing awesome stuff now. All these brands are just doing so well. Once these little quirks are gone, if it's like Panasonic finally gets phase detect at some point, autofocus, like the playing field becomes so incredibly level that it really is like, what's the camera you pick up and you're inspired by? Like, look, I'm using the Pocket 4K to film this right now, and I loathe this camera for anything else but the sensor. I hate the way it feels. I hate the way it holds in my hand. I hate the screen on it. I hate everything about it.
It's a beautiful sensor, totally.
But it's a beautiful sensor. And so I will use it in situations like this where I'm like, all those things that go out the window. I'm not holding the camera. I'm not running around with it. It's just sitting on a tripod. And so like, okay, this camera works in this situation. But 9 times out of 10, I'm going to grab my Lumix S5 or something like that, or even a Fuji camera, because when I pick it up, I know I'm happy. This is the thing that I want to do. It's not going to stop me from any of the things that I want to do. And I'm excited. And the work that I'm going to make is going to be better. You and I could both pick up any camera and make things that look fantastic. I know that about all of us that are doing this right now. It's really not the cameras that is making us who we are. It's all the skill and talent and ability that we've built up for years and years and years doing this. But we will sit there and still say, I prefer this camera over this camera, not because maybe it makes my work better, but it makes the flow and the experience better, right?
Well, all that said, going back to the new MacBooks it perfectly applies to those, because it really has enabled, it's greased the wheels. It's exactly. Added this smoothness to the process that I instantly felt right away. Yeah. And maybe the best example, and this will apply to a lot of people, is the Canon R5. The reviews coming out when they did were really focused on the image quality and the overheating. Like that's almost all the conversation was about. Like, incredible 8K raw video, but huge trade-offs that you can only shoot for so long. And that was so much of the conversation that I don't think we spent enough time talking about, that it was generating these files that were impossible to edit, even on Mac Pros, even on the best of the best machines. It would just chug. And from what I've heard, it's also been like that with some of the Sonys as well, the A7S IV, which one's which? A7S III and the A7 IV. Yeah, they have similar issues of like, you need horsepower to do this, and even then it's not necessarily going to be as fast as you hope for. And just every good new camera was like, okay, the image looks better and better, but it's going to be harder and harder to work with, even though for no obvious reason. It just wasn't clear why this was happening, but it was becoming a reality, and it meant that you had to shoot proxies if the camera supported it, or if it didn't shoot proxies, then generating proxies has to be part of your workflow, because you can't work with this footage. So great, we all got better image quality, but we literally either can't use the files or need to spend an extra 10% of the edit time just setting everything up to be workable. So now having machines that like, we don't need proxies for these at all. All of my cameras, I can just dump it onto this machine and edit it immediately. And that is really significant. And it just totally speaks to what you're saying, of that ability to like just get things done more quickly and and not spend so much time thinking about workarounds or how you're going to execute the technical aspects of the production. It's like you just put it out.
Yeah, what's kind of funny about that too is I think about this a lot with the iPhone. I can't remember some made a review and their title was like, "This is the most boring iPhone," but that, I mean, like that's a good thing because it works, right? There's something really odd about these new M1 machines, whether it's M1, M1 Pro, M1 Max. Like anytime you start using one, the lack of friction takes a little bit getting used to. There was like something about friction in the creative process that sometimes is a little bit beneficial. Like that little bit of frustration would make you be a little bit more creative. You had to think about around the box of like how you wanted to do certain things because you were conscious of that like limitation, right? Whereas now, like, I have the 14-inch M1 Pro and it's like, there's nothing wrong with it. I can't find a single thing wrong with this machine. And it works to the extent it's boring, right? It works so well that there's nothing overly exciting about it. The fact that it's just like, you flip that lid up, you're going to put an SD card in or whatever it is that you use. And from start to finish, that thing's just going to fly. It's just going to work the entire time. Would I trade that off for those limitations before? No, but there is something kind of weird about it. Yeah.
YouTube videos then? Like, what are we going to make YouTube videos about?
That's the thing, right?
It's like our cameras are perfect, our computers are perfect. Like, where are we going to go from here?
That's the thing. It's like that's that
Web3.
crisis. Yeah. That's that crisis I know a lot of YouTubers are going through right now. It's like, what do we focus on? And it's like, I have this other thing with YouTube where I'm starting to get out of the idea of making videos about making videos. And like, I just feel like when I make tech videos, I think I make better videos because I'm not focusing on teaching how to make that video. If that makes sense? Like I'm making a video and I'm presenting something and I'm putting it together, but I'm learning in that process because I'm not conscious about like, oh, I got to show them how to light this and how to do this. And why am I framing things like this way? And this is whatever the thesis of that tutorial may have been. And so now I'm in this point now where I want to do filmmaking videos, definitely for sure, and photography, but not necessarily about actually making them, which is a hard space to get into. And if you're not doing camera reviews either, it's a hard space to get views in as well. So I don't know for me if that like turns into like more video essay type stuff, which I have done in the past. It's done pretty well, but that's my headspace is in that kind of world right now as we go into the new year. And I'm like reflecting on this past year where tech videos did astronomically well. Everything did really well on that front, but it's like, is that really what I want to do? I'm learning as a filmmaker by making them and I know people will watch them, but it's not necessarily the utility or value that I think will be sustainable until the next crazy huge leap happens again, right? Which I don't know is foreseeable for the next few years, but who knows, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think that you've also got some freedom at this point by not having YouTube be your primary or like a significant part of your
number
business,
one
right?
goal.
And,
yeah, like it's not my number one. Yeah.
And I mean, that does become a bit of a challenge for me is like other people, it's like as it became, a kind of even part of how we run our business between commercial production and Anya's social media and then YouTube is basically how things are split. It means that I can't really take the same chances because I can't let a video bomb, which sometimes they do anyway. Like there's never a guarantee.
But you're never actively like thinking, I don't think this video is gonna do well. You're always going at it being like, I'm putting into this and I have all best intentions for this video to do well. Yeah.
But it also means that sometimes I don't get to do videos that I'm like, this would just be fun. Like, I just want to talk about this. Like one that the chance has passed is when I had the Canon C200. I'd figured out a pretty great workflow that I think probably would have helped out a lot of other people. I think I talked about it on the podcast once or twice. I was like, I should do this video. It should be like 40 minutes long of like, here's how to work with this camera. But there's just I have too many, like business related jobs to do, like, things that clients are waiting for to do this sort of for fun project that would be really time consuming. And there's no business case for it really, which is super lame, right? Like, it's not where you want to end up being, but it's like, it's just part of the difference of like running creative pursuits as a business versus just to like enjoy it. So I don't know. I wouldn't trade it. Like I like the way I like that it's a business and it allows me to spend more time doing it. So I'm not going to change it to just being a hobby, but there's trade-offs. So.
Yeah, I have a lot of friends that like operate in that same sort of like sub 100K, sub 50K space, and like the thing that we always have conversations about is like we're still small enough to experiment, right? Like I don't lose sleep if a video tanks at all. Like especially if it's a video I really enjoyed making. Like I just did like a silly video, like an ode to the ceramic Apple Watch, the Series 2, that was like not even a minute long. And I feel like if I was like 200,000 subscribers, I might have been very hesitant about putting that video up, but at this point, like even as things get bigger and videos do a lot better, like I'm still in a headspace where I'm like, if a video gets under 5,000 views, I'm not losing sleep over it. If it's a video I really enjoyed making, because I had the fun in the process to do it. I do know I will certainly get to a point at some point where there's more to all of this, that, whether it's more revenue or whatever it ends up being, that I'll probably lose that ability within that platform to do those sort of experiments. And so I'm just sort of like latching onto it while I still can, as the honeymoon phase sort of ends with YouTube on that as a creative sense. Or I could stumble upon a format that I really, really love doing that people also want to watch, right? That I'm fully getting all of the like emotional impact that I want out of the creativity side of it. Personally speaking, I just haven't found that yet. I've found what works in my space that people want to see me talk about. It's just not necessarily what I want to talk about. So like there's a disconnect between what the audience wants from me and what I want to give an audience. And I'm really trying to sort that out at this point. I think it's good to sort it out now, because it's like, I don't want to sort it out when I don't have much of a choice anymore. Right.
Totally. Yeah. No. And I totally get that. Of like, I'm always doing this push and pull of like, what works versus what do I want to do? And I already am, Ed, I'm not striking that balance in a way that's optimizing for growth, because if I was, I wouldn't do so much that's like targeted towards professional creators, because there's so many less of them. Like there's, I feel like all of them probably already listen to this podcast. And if like to be somebody that is willing to spend more than $5,000 on a camera, or, that you're editing multiple videos in a week, or when you do a photo shoot, you've got more than a few thousand images to sort through. Like it's relatively less people doing it. A lot more people are doing it casually or aspiring to do more. And so, yeah, I've already kind of sliced the pie a little bit thinner, and I know that it would be more advantageous to aim for like a wider segment to that market by doing just like broader tech stuff, like basically just talking about the iPhone literally all the time. That's my, that's where my numbers really come from.
Same. I joke with Gregory McFadden. He's Greg Gadgets. Like he's got his niche. He basically only talks about Apple stuff, does exceptionally well at everything. And I joke with him, I'm like, there's a world where I could only do videos around the keynotes and I would do fine, right? Like I would do just fine, just making videos like 3 times a year. Like I'd do a spritz like every 3 times a year and put out 5-6 videos around launches. And I would just probably just as happy as I am now. And I would just have way less work, but there's too much of a drive within myself to do more on the platform with what I'm interested in and what I think I know I'm capable of, that it doesn't feel like enough. So it's like, I know I can do it. That's another problem I have. And you might feel this too sometimes. Like sometimes when you finally realize you know how to do something, it doesn't become interesting anymore. It's like the chase of the pursuit to get to some sort of success with something, right? You're like, 100%. Oh shit, I did it. Cool. What's next? I figured it out. Like I know when 50K happens, I'm going to be like, yeah, that happened. What's next? Right?
Yeah. No, that is so human nature, and so much of, something I'm sort of guilty in by like pushing people to buy new stuff is like, I also want to always remind people, you're not just going to be happy once you have the thing. I'm telling you, this new product is awesome. These new Macs are incredible, and they will improve your workflow. But you're going to get them, and you're going to get used to it, and you're going to want something else. So
totally,
always.
I don't know how you feel, but like
it's a treadmill.
The iPhone's an iPhone again. Like it only took a month or two for that to happen. You know what I mean? Like it was really, really cool and exciting, and I was like very inspired by it. And like I said, now I'm back to shooting like with Max 100T and stuff. But yeah, it's like then it's just my phone. It's an iPhone again, right?
No, actually, that is an effect. Yeah. You'll always see that on my Instagram as well. That like I have so many iPhone shot photos for the few months right after the phone comes out, because I have all this energy behind it, and like each photo looks better because it was shot on the new phone. And then once it becomes the old phone, it's like, oh, these are just normal photos. I don't know.
Yeah. It's all psychological, man. It's like I got invited to that like Apple shooting experience event when it came out too, and it was like,
I saw that. Yeah,
I was sucking in the Kool-Aid of like, this is groundbreaking, like what we can do and what we can shoot with it. And I'll tell you right now, it's like, yeah, they're great cameras, but they've been great cameras for a while now, right? And I wouldn't discourage anybody with a camera from an iPhone from the last 3 years or so. Of course, technically, there's stuff to say that are a lot better with these ones now, but from a pure, like when you post something to Instagram or Twitter, there's not a whole lot of people that are going to be able to tell you which one was which. Was it a pixel? Is it this or at that? If you want to get technical with it, yeah, we can all sort of figure it out and pixel peep at these things, but brass tacks, I really don't think it makes a huge difference, right? It's just whatever, like I said, what inspires you to, it's funny you say like the photos look better when you first get it. I think it looks better because we're excited and we're shooting things that look better. It's not really necessarily the camera that got a whole lot better. It's us actually using it properly. It's the energy. Yeah.
I think that's true. But there also are those benchmark moments that, you don't always necessarily realize they're happening as they do, but when you look back, you can spot them. Like
Oh, for sure.
when
Yeah.
Smart HDR got good, which it's actually a little blurry in my mind. I know it's after the 10, like the 10 wasn't quite there.
Yeah, the
I think
10
it
was a
the
weak
10.
one. The 10 was still
The
weak. It was like
10R
11 Pro. I remember
S.
I did that with Isaac. I was like, well, this camera's actually like I can see. I have a visual, like I can see that this looks a
Yeah.
lot better now.
Yeah, and
for
looking
sure.
back, and you can especially see it now with people that haven't updated. So whenever I'm looking at people's cameras and like I see, I'm like, oh, you're on an 8 or you're on a 10. Like I can see it. It looks worse.
There's
And
people
then since
listening
then,
right now with an iPhone 7. They're like, I gotta get
I'm
out of
telling
it.
those are the ones I'm saying, like, go buy a used 10s, you know, like
Totally.
you don't need
Yeah.
to get the newest one, but like there are these jumps. And the thing is, we just hit that again with the new Macs, right? Like now M1, you know, any Apple silicon is like, this is the time that you'll see that bump. You really will like feel it, and it actually can make a substantive change to your workflow for all the future going forward. And anybody that stays on the older ones will kind of hold on to a bit of a disadvantage. So I don't know. Maybe that's why, as we want to talk about the new Macs in every single episode of this,
Totally. Yeah.
the next year, is because like we hit this. This is a big deal. Let's not forget how significant it is. So
It's like, for me, it's like we hit the mid 2015 MacBook Pro again. You know what I mean? It's
right,
like that's that laptop. I hung on to the mid 2015 to like late 2017, almost 2018. I had that machine and I was using it for everything. And like I said, I got around the limitations of it. I knew what I had to do, proxy, whatever, but I made it work. And it was a machine that I held on to for so long because I just was not happy with everything from like 2018 or even 2016 till now. So I feel like now at this point with this machine, it feels like a machine I'll probably hang on to for another 4 or 5 years, if not indefinitely, like just keeping it in the fold, right?
that's
So
still my wife's
that's
machine.
yeah.
It's actually 2014, not even 2015, and it's significant because that's actually when we're working on photography, everything gets ingested into her machine first, and she does all the initial editing and sorting and all that. So like it gets used as a major part of our workflow. And she's just like, I love this computer. Like the new ones might be great, but I don't care because I already have the computer that I love and there's nothing wrong with it. So, you know, I'm going to keep using it. And I'm like, that's great. Like that's actually the most successful story of a computer, is that it keeps working for you. If you feel like you need to replace it every few years, that's like, well, I don't know. We're in a little bit different position, I think, because video and 3D are like the only things that really, really push computers to like needing the latest. Photography has not been pushing computers for a few years now. So it's funny, whenever I make videos about, you know, like, how is this new Mac for photographers? I kind of admit the truth right up front. I'm like, well, they're already good enough. You already have a good enough machine probably right now, unless you're doing big like focus stacking or panorama HDRs or like gigapixel, whatever. And most people are not. And if they are doing it, they definitely mention it in the comments. But it's just like for any regular photographer, you're already fine. But I'll still make the video and I'll still talk about it. And like, there's always room for improvement. But and I actually think a lot of the choke points still haven't fully been addressed with photography. Like for all the positive things I've had to say about these, when I'm editing in Lightroom and Photoshop and Capture One, actually, there's still all these moments where it's like, if I just save in Photoshop, even to the internal hard drive, which you know how fast it is, like I've benchmarked it, I see how fast it is. I'm still waiting 20 seconds, like a while. It's not instant. It's not that fast. Save for web is still super slow. The blur filters, like just opening the window and then generating the preview, super slow. Lightroom, as you just flip through photos, this is maybe one of the worst ones, is it's still not instant. Like you still always need to watch a lower quality preview preload, and then the real one loads in and you don't get the histogram instantly. So if you're trying to just flip back and forth to compare two images, you don't have this instant back and forth. And the amount faster that the hard drive and GPU and everything is, it should be instant based on the results we've seen everywhere else. And it's totally not. So there's some kind of like hidden bottlenecks that are still really affecting daily workflows that I don't think are going to get fixed in the next few hardware updates. I think there's something weird going on with the software. So
I think, yeah, I definitely think it's software for sure. The one thing that I'm hoping for at some point is better H.265. For me, it's not the importing or editing and stuff like that. These machines still struggle at exporting H.265. Like I know, like Gerald Undone, he's got a 3080 and a PC, and he can like render out H.265 like lightning. And I just can't with any of these M1 machines that I've played with. It's still slow, right?
Speaking of, okay, huge thank you for a tip that everybody should get. When I'm exporting my videos from Final Cut Pro. It's always been incredibly slow to process a 4K video on YouTube.
Yeah.
Like a while ago, it was a full day. So I had uploaded overnight so I could publish in the morning. I noticed a
Yeah.
mistake in the morning and I'm like, oh crap. Okay, well, I got to make this quick little change. Export, totally fast, no problem. Okay, now upload it to YouTube pretty quick. So I got decent internet. All right, now watch it process. And it took more than 10 hours. And
Yeah.
that is infuriating. Like it's so
Absolutely.
frustrating. So anyway, what was your tip? I'll let you, I won't spoil it for you,
Yeah.
spoil the
Yeah.
punchline,
So
but what's your tip?
I'm going to try and retrace the first person that told me, and I feel like it was Gary, Everyday Dad. We were talking about it, and he had just mentioned in passing. I was like, "What?" Because he said his processing was so fast. I'm like, What are you using?" I don't think he kind of realized what was happening. He might have, but it was like, try using Apple devices 4K. So when you get it to that export option in the share sheet, it's Apple devices, and there's like Apple devices 4K, right? So I tested it, and to be honest, you probably experienced it now too. Every single time, it actually is faster than the processing bar can even tell you. It'll say like 95% process. You click the link in your YouTube studio, and you can see that it's already 4K. So it seems to be some sort of like M4V container, which is technically still an MP4. It's just Apple's nomenclature for the end, but it still seems to be some sort of flavor of H.264 that YouTube just loves. And it's like literally like, it's like honestly instant process. The most maybe I've waited a minute or two for it, but doesn't matter the length of the video, short ones, long ones, doesn't matter the resolution. I've done 4:3 aspect ratio. I've done, 4K. I've done 5K stuff even. And anytime I use that Apple devices, it just rips on the process.
Yeah.
One thing I will notice.
Yeah. It is so weird that it works. Like I don't understand.
It is weird. Yeah, it's strange. I don't understand it either.
It does not make any sense. And it does feel like Final Cut actually tweaked their typical H.264 export, because this is what I was usually doing, and I think most people do, because it gives you the highest quality file. Is you go to in the same list of like all the Apple ProRes 422 options in there.
There's like
is H.264.
yeah.
No options. There's no flexibility. It's just like H.264 makes a pretty big chunky file, but that's kind of good for archiving. It means you've got something there if you want to work with it again in the future. So that's still what I'll like deliver to clients, and sometimes a ProRes version as well. But when you go to YouTube, like the Apple devices one is just insanely fast. So that 10-hour upload that I was talking about a second ago is now, like say 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes.
Yeah, it's awesome. Anytime I see people complaining about like, especially like for me, like when launches happen and I'm like really like, 13 mini review, I put one up the day that I picked that phone up. I went at it, right? And, like I had pre-planned some things that I wanted to cover, and I did the things that I wanted to test and everything. But like I goaled myself to say, like, I'm going to pick this thing up at the Apple Store at 8 a.m. and I want this video up today. And I was able to do it. And I shot it. I actually shot the whole thing on 13 mini too, but I did that Apple devices 4K, and I knew I was never going to hit that roadblock of like, because you imagine if I did all that work all that day and it's like, oh, processing for 6 hours, 7 hours, it doesn't go up till midnight. I would have been so upset about that, right? And so for me, like having that in my back pocket, knowing that I can sort of like wing a video or put something up like in the moment on the fly, and like we said before, when I don't feel a barrier, yeah, that Apple devices 4K is crazy. I just wish that there was like some more literature about why. I would like to understand it so that I could like maybe, whether it's through compressor or something like that, tweak that a little bit. Cause like, I do think it's a bit of a lower quality file than I'd probably be happier with anywhere else. Like I'm sure it's totally fine for YouTube, but like you said, I wouldn't like deliver a client project. I wouldn't even use it for archival purposes. It really is only for YouTube, because I definitely think it's an 8-bit file, and I have seen some like banding, some pixelation type stuff in moments where I probably didn't want it. But the trade-off is that instant process, and I think most people will never notice that thing is just something we know because we know the file. So I think it's worth it. I just love to be able to tweak it at some point and sort of figure that out. It's same with Twitter. It's like I was talking to a Twitter engineer about video, and I was just like, just tell us what will work best for you. You know what I mean? Like put something in an FAQ or whatever so we can like understand what format will actually provide the best results. Because like, why can I see like Warner Brothers or Marvel post like a trailer and it seems to look just fine on all of my devices, and then I'll post a video and it looks like a potato? So there's something weird going on there. Like, why just be more open with the formats that you guys want to accept, and be granular, because the people that want to find out will find it out. It's kind of a weird thing with the back ends of these systems, right?
Apple devices that export option doesn't have the options that I want, but even so, it's the best hack that I've had in so long.
Totally.
Speaking of compression though, I have just a quick little rant. Have you watched Wheel of Time at all yet?
I haven't yet. I saw you tweeting about though. And it's been out for a while,
I'm
right? That
tweeting
show's
about
been
it
out
like
for a
every
bit.
week. Yeah, every week it comes out. I'm tweeting about it because it drives me crazy. So I'm not really into it. It's fine. Like, it's a fine show, whatever. It's not the best. But if anybody doesn't know, it's extremely expensive. It was like $80 million, one of the more expensive shows of all time. And it looks awful. Part of this is, I think there's some creative decisions that didn't work that well. A lot of the wardrobe looks too new and like unworn for being in a ancient mythical age. There's just like little details about that, but I could kind of look past it. But for the most expensive show that I think Amazon's done at this point, it is so compressed. Like, the macro blocking, these big chunks of colors flying throughout the image are absolutely horrible. Like, and I've had people, I had friends just message me like, without me bringing it up. They're just, like, a friend was just like, "Are you watching this? Have you seen this? Like, this is horrible." Yeah, Anya noticed it, and like, that's not typically, she's just usually into the content, and she's like, "Why does this look so bad?" And as soon as I posted online, everybody else also was like, "Yeah, what is going on?" So anyway, it's just that even Amazon is able to shit the bed at the final
Totally.
goalpost, where it's like they spent all this money, they shot in all these incredible locations, they put all this work into it, and then the compression just kills it. And I blame it on, to me, it looks like they added some heavy-handed grain, like digital grain at the last step, with some kind of strong sharpening, and that is just killing the compression algorithms, because you can see that happen on YouTube as well. If you ever add
they don't play well. They don't play well necessarily.
Yeah, totally. If you add digital film grain, it'll look great in your NLE. When you're editing, you're like, wow, this looks like real film. And if it's the wrong size and the wrong randomness, the algorithm can really easily totally choke on it. And instead of seeing the grain, you only see a softer, more compressed image. Because the randomness is what is the most difficult for a compression algorithm to handle. Same with a moving shot is much more challenging than a static shot. So Amazon should know this. They are delivering a ton of video every day. So I don't know.
There's a good example I usually tell people for like production quality and like what a filmmaker can get away with. So if you maybe already seen it, and some people love this movie. It's sort of taken on a bit of a cult classic status. But Michael Mann's Miami Vice movie, the one with Colin Farrell and Jamie Foxx, it's worth rewatching or watching just to see the early days of digital. So it was the Thompson Viper was the camera at the time, which also shot Fincher's Zodiac. So only a few movies actually were used with that camera. And this is like literally one of the first like Hollywood level digital cameras that people were using. Even the way the hard drive system worked, like emulated a film cartridge, right? It was like you got to replace the mag to change like the hard drive on it. So they used the Thompson Viper, and I think it was a Sony F900, which is like an early like CCD Sony camera as well. So they have the two cameras on that entire movie, and you'll see two shots of like Colin Farrell and Jamie Foxx on like a rooftop talking to each other, and it'll cut from like clean to the most grainy, like ISO 6400 fixed pattern noise from like a 5D Mark II. You know what I mean? Like literally like some of the worst noise you've probably seen in footage in this like blockbuster at the time feature film. And the thing with Michael Mann is like he goes story first. What's the narrative? What's happening? And I'd be really curious to know if how many audiences were actually like turned off by that in that film. You know what I mean? It's like, we'll look at it from a technical standpoint, but like, well, what the hell happened with the second camera? But I was rewatching it recently on Blu-ray just to see it like in a higher fidelity, and just seeing it jump around within the same scenes, like in two shots, to go from clean to noisy to clean to noisy to like high ISO, low ISO. I just thought that was like so fascinating how like from a decision from a filmmaker to say, who cares? Like you could tell, I'm sure people on set were like, this looks awful, dude. Like you can't, what are we doing? Like, we got to fix this. We got to clean it up in post. We got to do all this, all that. And I'm sure he was just like, yeah, but what's it really? Is it impacting the story? And I don't think I could make an argument that it was. And then you go, fast forward to now, and you got like Peter Jackson's Get Back with like the work that they did with that Beatles doc footage. Like from what I've gone into like the rabbit hole on it, it was like 16 mil, grainy as crap, looked awful, flat colors that they blew up to 35 mil originally. Actually, like the original filmmakers blew it up to 35 mil because they realized halfway through shooting we probably should have shot 35 mil. So then they had this like 35 mil source footage that was actually from 16 mil. And when you watch, I don't know if you've seen it, but if you watch this on Disney Plus, it is gorgeous. You could think they shot it like maybe in the 80s or 90s.
If you've gone down the rabbit hole, send me whatever links you saw, because I want to know more.
Oh yeah, for sure. I will, for sure. I've done a good deep dive with that one.
Visually, I had a bit of a feeling that they might have gone a little too aggressive with
I was just about to say, but the noise reduction
feels
went crazy.
Very flat.
Totally. Yeah. It was like, there's some scenes where it's like, wow, this looks amazing. And then like throughout part 2, part 3, I was like, they kind of and not knowing the source footage, it might've been warranted. They kind of had to, but there's a certain level of like sort of the thesis of what I think of that Michael Mann example is just like, sometimes it's okay. This is like a very Casey Neistat thing too. It's like, don't let perfect get in the way of being great with your footage. It's okay to be shaky. It's okay to be out of focus if the story is still moving along and it's not really changing the audience's perception of that story you're trying to tell. Whereas I found like, I could see if you were restoring Beatles footage, you're going to probably push it more than you would a feature or something like that. You know what I mean? Because like, I think a lot of it was just like, we know people are sitting here just watching, 4 guys in a room playing instruments. Let's make it try and look as good as possible. And I think creatively, without a barrier, you could probably go overboard with it, still thinking it looks good, not realizing, I bet you people would have been totally engaged with the story with even the original footage, right? So it's just like a thought experiment, right? Yeah.
My main reaction was actually more so than the grain. I didn't think about it that much, but what I really thought about is how good the film looks. Like, what a vote for film this is. That like, this was shot on not the primary, on the cheaper format of the day. A lot of things are out of focus. Like, I feel like maybe their lens choice was a little weird. Like, it's a lot of missed focus.
And I'm guessing they were self-focusing too, right? Because it wasn't like they had ACs and stuff. They were like literally looking through a viewfinder trying to figure that out. Yeah.
But it looks so beautiful. There's so many shots where you're like, this is just gorgeous. And if this had been shot in any time from the 80s to the early 2000s, like, it would look like crap, like terrible. There's such a long period when things were shot on video and then bad digital, and all of that, everything behind the scenes stuff from that whole 30 years, 40 years, looks like garbage. And this 16 millimeter film holds up so beautifully. But I do have a production anecdote that I heard. I got to share this link. So it was super interesting about how they did the audio for it.
The AI stuff. Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's brilliant, because you're listening to it and you're like, wait, so they're just jamming, right? Like, this is just rehearsals. They're only recording on one overhead boom. I know how that should sound. Like, I'm sitting here in a studio with sound blankets around me, and like, it sounds pretty bad. Like, it's actually very echoey in the space, and I have a mic 2 inches from my mouth, and still you can hear the construction happening down the hall. Like, it's so easy to have audio problems, but they're in a big open warehouse, and basically what they're able to do is take the mono track, which is just recorded to a 1/4 inch tape. Like, at the time, basically this would be the, like a portable record. It's like equivalent of recording to your iPhone. Like, it's the simplest recording device. But, still, like, since it's mono going to 1/4 inch, probably there's some fidelity there, but you only still have one mic source. So you're not able to do any sort of mixing. You can't make the drums louder or guitar or vocals louder or whatever. I think it's just whatever the sound was in the room. So like you're saying, the AI that Peter Jackson's team was able to develop allowed them to really split those sources. And I've heard versions of that on YouTube where there's like isolated vocal tracks that are done digitally that sound terrible. Like, usually they don't really work. They found a way to do it well, where you could just perfectly hear a clean version of, say, the guitar with the drums removed and the vocals removed, and it sounded good. So they did that to each audio track and then mastered as if they had a multi-track recording. So now, okay, we have a clean track of the drums, clean track of the guitar, clean track of the bass and vocals. We can master it as if we had a multi-track recording and really tweak them individually. And I'm just like, that's so brilliant. That's like, that would only be possible right now. That's a totally new. If we had watched this documentary 5 years ago, we would have been listening to mono
fuzz. Yeah.
Mediocre.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Like, it wouldn't have been that good.
Yeah. There is one thing. It kind of blew up on TikTok because a lot of people do their like remixes and stuff like that and to songs. And it's called, I might botch the name, but it's LALA.ai. So it's like lala.ai. And here's the funny thing. So I had a client ask for source audio from a video that we had done, and I knew I had it on like my hard drive system that I have somewhere, and I was like, oh god, I don't know if I can feel like digging this thing up right now. hopefully this client doesn't watch this video. But I was going through it and I was like, you know what? I remember there was that like isolation AI thing that was out there to like remove the music track from dialogue. What would happen if I used it on a video? And it was just like a talking head with music underneath it. And so I threw the video file through it, and I was able to give them completely separated tracks, the music and the dialogue completely separated, all just by drag and dropping into that system. So whatever that Peter Jackson used is some sort of emulation or development on stuff that has existed, but the way they've perfected it is insane. Like I'm sure you saw that video where they actually show you the isolated tracks where it's like, here's just the drums, here's just the bass, here's just the guitar.
No, so
and it sounds like
I haven't seen it yet.
Oh yes, okay, I'll send it to you. So he shows like the mix, and they show how they actually like separate it. And like I was listening with my AirPods Max all the time, like through the TV, and I was like, it literally feels like they had a direct source mic up to like John Lennon's amplifier. Like it doesn't sound like they pulled it from that, which I actually think was honestly like a mono or stereo mic, like not a great microphone that was capturing all of that.
The weird thing is like is they're cutting back and forth. Sometimes they are playing multi-track recordings, and it does not stand out to me when it's the single microphone.
No, you can't tell.
Tiny
you literally
like,
never know.
They both sound great, like really great.
It's crazy. Have you ever seen? Did you see his World War I documentary too? Like that one's.
I actually started watching it and didn't finish it. I think.
The tech of it was really interesting to me, and like the ADR for me was really interesting. How like they added the audio after, I thought was kind of cool. So like silent footage, like that was really interesting to me. Like how they basically like they filled in the gaps for the sound that they didn't even have at the source, which I thought was really interesting. It's cool that he's doing like that's Peter Jackson late in his career, like having fun, right? Like you do Lord of the Rings and God knows King Kong and stuff, and now you can sit back and be like, let's remaster the Beatles. Like that to me is so interesting as a filmmaker.
Yeah, no, oh man, I'm so like I have so much Beatles in my head right now because of that. Like,
totally.
It's so long.
There's some songs I don't ever want to hear again, but
yeah,
but I hear like I Dig a Pony one more time, I'm gonna lose it.
They let you hear multiple takes as well, because I feel like if this was edited to be a traditional 2.5 hour piece, you would literally hear each song once. You'd never hear it played through.
No,
twice.
you would. Yeah, you wouldn't get that train of like seeing the inception of like Paul McCartney come up with Get Back to the final performance of the actual song within the span of like 2 weeks. It's wild.
I love that. I love that moment though, where you just see it develop like in real time in 1 or 2. I mean, it's a viral clip because it happens in the length of a Twitter video that you can see the song basically get written. It's like, man, so good. That, and then I've also been very down a Dave Grohl rabbit hole lately because I was reading his
nice
biographies. So I just love. I mean, it's funny because like Foo Fighters music, they're not my favorite band in the world, but I just love Dave Grohl. Like, and Nirvana might be my favorite band in the world. So like, put those together. He did a documentary about like dads in like rock. I can't remember what it's called, but it was like dads in the music industry. Essentially, he did like that documentary. I thought that was great. Like he's another guy's like he just did one. He did one with his mom.
Oh, nice.
Cradle to Stage.
Awesome.
He's like just like all about like, half of the book is about his family, like just so much like gratitude for reaching the place that he has, and so much humility about how much everybody else contributed to his career. And it's like, even if this is a show, like even if it's not really him, maybe he's a egomaniac and deep down he doesn't believe any of this and he actually is super selfish. It almost doesn't matter, because I'm like, I just wish more celebrities would put this face on. Like this is the right way to act in public, is like, show just anybody that has reached any sort of success by other people appreciating their work owes it to that community, and so the only right response is humility and gratitude. And like, I loved hearing like a whole audiobook that was just full of that emotion. So it was great.
That's awesome. That's great. If you want something else to check out, because you were talking about if you want something to check out with 16 mil, Spencer is shot on 16 mil and it's gorgeous. The one about Princess Diana, Kristen Stewart plays Princess Diana.
I saw clips from it.
It's some of the nicest 16 mil. Yeah, it's some of the nicest 16 mil I've ever seen put on film. Like it's absolutely gorgeous. I could have just watched an hour of her driving in her like Porsche through the countryside. It was just like, I saw it in theaters at TIFF and I was like, this is like sick. Look, I'm not totally into film for photography. I went through a phase and I had my whole film phase, but my God, there is something to be said about like real 16 mil and 35 millimeter film that looks, it's unparalleled. As good as emulation has got, you can go down the Steve Yedlin path of like we can emulate everything. And I agree to an extent, we actually can emulate most stuff, but there's a feel. Spencer was really one of the movies that I watched again. I actually watched it again recently at home, where I was like, I know we can emulate close to this, but it's just not quite as good as the real thing. That movie, when you watch it, like you really couldn't pull this off digitally.
Before you go, what's your favorite film emulation currently?
My favorite one is called Filmbox. If you haven't heard of it, it's only for Resolve, unfortunately. So I do have to round trip through Resolve, and it is very expensive too.
A week ago.
What's that?
I just downloaded it a week ago.
Oh, nice. And they also have another one called Scatter, which is like a Pro Mist emulation, so I have a friend who's a DIT, and he works on like Amazon Prime shows and stuff like that. And he told me about it originally. He's like, the guys behind this are like top tier, like the emulation they're using for mist. He's like, nobody's using mist filters anymore. We're all doing it in post. I'm like, there's no way. How could it be as good as actually putting like a Pro Mist or a Dream filter on? And like, so Scatter is one that's unreal. It like emulates like Pro Mist quarter, 1/8, half, all the strengths of like a mist. But then Filmbox is nuts. Like the control and just the emulation that they have is like halation too. It'll add like the little slight red and pink glow around light sources and stuff. It's really, really good. I personally think it's worth every penny of it if you're really into getting that film emulation look. But it's still only as good as your source footage. You still got to shoot in a way that benefits that sort of emulation. And I think that's even a testament to like Spencer. It's like, the film's doing a lot of work, but production design's doing 90% of it. You know what I mean? It's the colors that are in the frame that are making that film work so well. And a lot of people will just like film a shot like this and throw an emulation on it and be like, why doesn't this look good? This doesn't look like I thought it was going to look. It's like, because you're not wearing the tones and the colors and the things that you need in that frame to really make like Kodachrome and Kodak, 500T, whatever, 50D look the way you want it to look, right? And it's like, I always joke, it's like we're always like putting LUTs on A-roll, and we're wearing like, I put a black t-shirt on, I'm like, why doesn't this LUT make my A-roll look proper? You know what I mean? Like, oh, maybe I should wear a colorful shirt or something and put some set design. And like all of a sudden, okay, it doesn't matter what LUT I use, it looks fine in camera, right?
That is great.
Yeah, the emulation is great, but you really got to start, it's got to look good in the frame on the camera first, right?
Yeah. No, I'm completely behind that. And yeah, also just to give another vote to Filmbox, I still only have the free version. I didn't pay for it yet. But it's doing things that I just was so confused why other emulation wasn't doing, and halation is the biggest one by far, because like Film Convert has been around for a while now, like 5 or 6 years.
And I use it a lot. I used to use it a lot. Yeah,
a lot of people. Yeah, but it just doesn't get anywhere near it just never does actually look like film to me. It like gives some of the qualities, but halation is such a huge element of like, it is always there on real film. In like, you can always see it when the contrast is right, basically like high contrast edges. It's guaranteed to appear if it's shot on film. And the fact that it was never there in all this other film emulation software is like, well, then it's obviously not film. Then also the way that there's some stuff that's just so subtle, like it's hard for me to even see and identify why it works when it does. But like the way that gate weave looks and functions, it's so, and the way that like having color in the highlights, it's so hard to pull that off in the appropriate way, because there's nothing I like less than just seeing like pure yellow highlights when they clearly would be white. Like I just don't like that approach at all. Like I don't want a strong tone in what is obviously a true white, like a specular highlight, for example. If it's I sure have something in the room behind me that's like, if you have something clipping, that can't be a color, because if it's clipping, it's supposed to be in some version of white. Yeah. So there really needs to be this approach of like just hitting the highest highlights, and then you still let the specular highlights go white. Anyway,
no, it's gorgeous. The grain is really nice too. Everything about it is really nice. Yeah. I just wish they would have a Final Cut option. I would love to just keep it all in one NLE and not have to round trip so much to Resolve for it. But when I do, it's gorgeous. And honestly, it's accepted pretty much any footage that I've thrown at with. If you have a good log camera, whether it's Panasonic, Sony, Canon, whatever, it does a really good job of figuring out how it's supposed to look and matching. Like I also use it as like a camera matching software, because it's like I can throw Pocket 4K, Blackmagic film at it, and then also Vlog from a Panasonic. And because it knows the source footage and it applies that emulation directly to that source footage, they match so incredibly well. So it works almost like Cinematch in a way too. If you just need to like make things look the same, it does a really good job.
Nice. Yeah. No, I love it. But Patrick, thanks again for coming on.
Thank you for having me, man. Always a pleasure.
I always forget your actual Twitter handle. So if people are looking for you, it's
same as YouTube. So letter I, letter M, Patrick T. So I'm Patrick T.
That's it.
Yeah. Everywhere. Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. TikTok, I guess. Yeah.
Everywhere. All right. See you next time.
Everywhere. All right. Cheers.